Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. I'm ready to do my April wrap-up. I read 6 books and that is all to say that my reading has slowed down a little bit, but I've been enjoying it. But then again, I haven't really. I mean, what I'm trying to say is my April reading month has been a bit slower and the books have been a little bit more average to me. But I will get more into that. Of those 6 books I've read in April, 2 of those were rereads, and disclaimer right away, those rereads were my favorite of the month. Let's just get started and I will go through the books chronologically. The first book being a book I did a reading vlog about back in the beginning of the month, and that is How It Was by Janet Ellis. You can watch my reading vlog if you haven't already done that and see my views on this book. But I will say that since then, my feelings towards it have changed a little bit. This book definitely didn't make that much of an impression on me. I've actually already handed it over to a co-worker of mine, which is why I don't have the physical copy here. It just was an average story, in my opinion, which was good enough to read while I was doing it. But all in all, I think it was just a 2.5-star read for me. I didn't mind it, but it definitely didn't make an impact on me. Next book I read was a non-fiction book that has been standing on my shelves since last Christmas when I received it as a gift, and that is Lowborn by Carrie Hudson. Now, I won't go into star rating when it comes to this book because, as I said, it's a non-fiction. And I know that this author is also on the booktube community a little bit. I will say that it was definitely an important book which opens your eyes towards the society of Britain, and most specifically the poor society of Britain, because it's about this author who grew up in one of these poor societies. It's about her childhood and it's about how people in this society live and suffer, and how it's very hard to push through and also get a better life than the one you grew up with. Carrie Hudson managed to do that, and it's very interesting to see how she shifts from her current life with her husband and a better life to the life she had when she was a child. So definitely an eye-opener. And that's all I will say about this book. The next book I read was the first reread of the month. It was a classic. I was in the mood for one of those comfy reads that I had forgotten most of, but I knew I was in the mood for it for some reason. So I decided to pick up The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte. I read this book some years ago. I couldn't remember more than half of it, so I was curious to read it again. And it's very interesting because when I go back and look at my Goodreads review of this book from those years ago, my feelings towards this book now are exactly the same. This is a book that hooks me in the beginning and in the end, but in the middle I feel like it's dragging just a tiny little bit. And for that reason, it's a 4-star read for me, but it's definitely an impactful read about feminism, about breaking out from this mad and really bad relationship. And it's about falling in love and feeling those emotions that you can't ignore, but you know that those emotions aren't really good for you. It's about this woman who moves into Wildfell Hall, and then we get to know her through the eyes of a man living in the neighborhood who obviously falls in love with her, but there is something very mysterious about this woman and her son. That's all I'm going to say, but definitely a 4-star read. I really like it. It's a really good, comfortable, but not comfortable, but still a little bit comfortable classic read. I don't know if that makes any sense at all. Then I read another book which I've already handed over to my co-worker. It's a friend of mine who likes to read, and she loves to take over the books that I've read and don't want to keep on to. So she got that one as well, and that is Astonish Me by Maggie Shipstead. The book about ballet that I've been talking about a few times in my past videos because I've been meaning to read it. I finally did. It's part of my 2020 reading list, so I finally read it, and it was a 3-star read for me. Actually, this is one of those books that really aggravated me because I felt like it was building up, it was building up. And then once I had reached the ending, I was like, that was just nothing. And I was furious because I mean, it's a good enough book, but I personally have read enough of these kinds of books that's about development and family and secrets, and I just can't have it anymore. If you give me one of those books, it has to have a very powerful ending, and this one didn't. So I basically felt like I had wasted many hours when I finished this book. It actually put me in quite a reading slump, which is why I picked up the other reread I'm going to show you, because I just felt so defeated by this book, which is, as I said in the beginning, it's still a 3-star read for me because it was perfectly fine while I was reading it. It's just the lack of impact it left me with that really frustrated me. But it did give me all of the ballet that I needed, that I wanted, and that was good. So yeah, that's all I had to say about that book. Glad I finally read it. But that book pushed me to pick up my second reread, which is a book I read a few years ago, and once again I knew I was going to love it because obviously I loved it the first time around, but I had forgotten most of it. So I decided to pick up Fates and Furies by Lauren Graf. This is the Danish version, and this one was an easy 5-star read for me. It made me feel so happy to finally read some good literature that was speaking to me and that I was invested in from beginning till end. So yeah, a 5-star read for me. This was the best read of the month. This is the book that's about a marriage and how there are always 2 sides to a marriage. The first part of the book is from the husband's perspective, and then the second part is from the woman's perspective. And let me just say, this is an intriguing read. That's all I'm going to say, but definitely happy that I found this book, which put me in a better reading mood and put me in the mood to read my last book of the month that I managed to finish in April, and that is an ebook. I found it at my local library. So yeah, I read The Ballroom Bye, and I was curious to read this book for 2 reasons. I'd previously read another book of hers which was okay, but then this book a co-worker of mine recommended to me, said she had read it and really liked it, and I was curious, so I decided to pick it up, read it, and it was definitely one of those books that put thoughts into my head, and I like those reads. It's a book that follows 3 perspectives: a woman, a man, and a doctor, and all of these people have to do with a mental hospital, a mental facility in the beginning of the 1900s in England. That's all I can really say because I don't want to say too much, and it's a very slow going book, but at the same time it does have a few things happening in it. The reason why it put thoughts into my head is obviously because of the devastating conditions that people with mental problems were living under during those times, and also people who were being put in these facilities weren't really that mental at all. They didn't have any problems, they were just being normal people acting in frustrating ways, and that put them in this facility. So it put some thoughts in my head, and it definitely was an interesting read. So that one I gave 3.5 stars. So that was definitely a good ending to the month, even though while I was reading it was pretty slow going and I wasn't sure whether to keep on reading or not, but I'm definitely glad I did in the end. And that is it, because the last 2 books I started in April I still haven't finished, so you will have to wait and see what those books are. But for now, thank you so much for watching. I hope you also had a good reading month in April, and until my next video, happy reading!